One of the ones that's in there that's kind of fun is My Little Pony from like the 90s. I swear to God, it's
James is a brony. Welcome to another episode of The Caption Life, a podcast about comics and pop culture and how they impact us in everyday society. Deep in the heart of Texas, my name is Kevin, and I am being joined by my good friends James in Kentucky.
Hello, everyone.
And Sean in Indiana.
What's up?
And you just had to go there.
I did. Why not?
Why not? Oh,
Sean, you should make an online video of like introductions over like the course of history.
Yeah.
Just so that when you get to like the late 1990s, early 2000s, you can impress everybody with your "What's up" face.
The evolution of introductions. Yeah.
And then it came all back around too with Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yep.
With Luis.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I thought about.
Oh man.
Just like, it was like in Victorian times, like, "Good tidings, sir," and how it got all the way to "What's that?"
Right.
Sean, you would really do a good job of that.
Thank you. I might do that.
So we're recording on December 1st, and it's a very special day at the Caption Life household. Today is James's birthday, so we thought we would do a very special episode where Sean and I interview James on the history, or his personal history with comics. So that's what we're going to do today. We thought this was a good time for our listeners to get to know at least one of our co-hosts. We plan to do some other interviews with each other later on down the road. So, Sean, I'm going to let you kick it off. First, we're going to say happy birthday, James. Okay, can we just round of applause?
Happy birthday!
For he's a jolly good fellow.
Thank you. Just turned 35 today. So.
Oh, nice.
I feel like now I should have one of those big yellow purple cakes from Watchmen now with you singing "He's a Jolly Good Fellow" now.
You know what? I just saw that clip online like a few hours ago. And I don't have HBO, so I haven't been keeping up with that. But I will say that The Watchmen was a hugely important book to me, and I'm interested to see what they do with it, because I've heard nothing but like good things. So let's kick it off. Let's let Sean kick it off with with James's first question. No time limit on this, so James, take whatever time you need, and we'll see where this takes us.
Okay, let's do this.
All right, James. So, what is your earliest memory of comics?
My earliest memory with actual comic books was, I was really young. I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my uncle was really into comics at the time. And I guess technically is my great uncle, but this guy just has a side note, had like one of those Sam Elliott style mustaches. So, this really epic stash. So, nice. But that's completely beside the point. He was really into them. He had Batman, Spider-Man, everything that was coming out just then. So I would he would kind of share those with me a bit when I was about 4 or 5. We'd just sit down together. He'd read those, and then I'd look at the pictures and whatnot. So that was kind of my earliest memory with actual comic books. But I also remember being a kid about the time I was first able to read, looking for the comics page in the Sunday newspaper every week and reading through those too. So
I still do that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I don't get the newspaper, but like my mother-in-law does. So every time we go to visit her house, I I look through the stack of newspapers for the funnies. So James, did you have a favorite comic book to read as a kid, and what drew you to a specific character?
We didn't have a comic book store back where I grew up. So when I was around my great uncle who had them, I got to be around him, few times and stuff. But what really kind of began to draw me into a character was one time I came up and he bought me this Batman sticker book. So it had it's like part comic book, part sticker book, and it had the Batman story in it. But you like would peel and stick the sticker of Batman, or I think it's like a Batman, Robin, Joker story. So you'd have to put the sticker where it went and stuff. And between that and the 1989 Batman film, that's kind of what drew me to Batman in the first place. So it wasn't until later on that, I learned about, other characters and began to enjoy, the other characters as much as, if not more than Batman at the time.
I think a lot of people our age can point to the 1989 like Batman film as a jump off. I mean, I'm a little bit older than the two of you guys. I'm 37, so I was in the prime of my youth when that movie came out, and it's definitely I think something that brought, because it was the first big superhero film, so it was kind of like what brought the comics to like a lot of people's attention.
Yeah,
at least in the 80s, right? Because we always forget about Christopher Reeves as Superman. And that was, pretty successful. But I think it stopped around early 80s. But I mean, 1989, I think, that Batman movie.
As a matter of fact, I think Superman 4 came out the year before or 2 years before Batman, like the one that kind of finished it off. But yeah, You're totally right. That is definitely, I made a mistake in saying that was the first big superhero movie because Superman was doing it a whole decade before.
Right.
It's almost like the Superman film of the 70s. And those four films, it almost feels like that kind of belongs in the same kind of time capsules like the 1960s Batman TV show. Even though, they're completely different, everything, but it seems like modern superhero comic movies really started with Batman in 89.
Next question, James. How have your tastes changed over time?
I read what comics I could growing up and stuff. And then, went to college, got busy, kind of did that thing to where I kind of stopped reading comics for a while. And then I came back to, and started reading them again and finally picked up Sandman by Neil Gaiman. And since then, I still have a love for the superhero comics. But now I just find myself reading anything at all in graphic form. Just started reading Neil Gaiman's Barrack and Gods comic put out by Dark Horse. I've never been able to get through the novel, but the graphic novel is just really, really good. I mean, the art's just beautiful. So, and the story is just really, really good when you put those two together. So yeah, man, I really just read a little bit of everything. So if anything's changed, it's just deepened since then. I really like, the things coming out from the smaller publishers too. The indie comics, and then you've got Ahoy that's doing Second Coming right now by Mark Russell, and Richard Pace is probably one of the best. I mean, I'd put that best comics of the year. So, I mean, if there's anything that's happened over the last 10 years or so since I've begun to read comics more, again, it's just been that kind of love of it that just kind of keeps me coming back for more. So it's just gotten deeper and wider, I guess.
So, James, you touched on this a little bit, but what's your favorite non-superhero genre that you like to read?
Oh boy. Are you talking about
are you a fan of horror, westerns?
Yeah.
Things like that?
Yeah.
I'm glad Kevin piped in because I didn't write this question, so I wasn't quite sure how to ask that, how to answer that. Yeah.
I really like reading things that have to deal with mythology in comics a lot. I mentioned American Gods, and I only started Comixology had volume 1 on sale for 89 cents the other day. I'm like, well, I've been wanting to read this, I'll buy it. And I've gotten through about the first 4 issues of that. But I mean, you've got things going from Norse mythology, then you've got things from like the American mythology in there, and then there's some other things that I'm not sure where it's from. But I know that Neil Gaiman's going to get to that eventually. So that's just been kind of one of my like favorite genres to kind of come back to. It's just the ones with the mythological elements in it.
Well, and I feel like that would be a really interesting one too, because with it being more folklore and myth, is I would imagine that like writers and artists would have a lot of fun with it, because it gives them a lot of freedom to think about how to interpret and how to present that visually as well too. So I like that that genre of comics in general for that reason.
I've also been reading some books that put the horror elements into the mythological stuff too, and it's just it's just really well done. Just when you can kind of mix all that in together, it's just a lot of fun that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
James, what comic has had the biggest impact on you as an adult, and why do you think that?
That's a hard one. There's been a few actually that has the Sandman books were big, because that's kind of what brought me back into comics in the first place. I went to my local library when I was living in Lexington, and they had the entire run of them there. So I checked out as many of those as I could at the time, and I just read them through so quickly. The story was just phenomenal. Then I think one you could put in there is a newer one, Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerrits is really good. Scott Free kind of deals with some things like depression and whatnot in there. For you two being dads, there's a lot of things in there too that I think you all would like. If
I've read it. I read it on the way home from Disney World in September. I really liked it a lot.
So the next question we have for you is, I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to follow up with something. So
okay.
So the next question is, what's your favorite guilty pleasure comic? But I feel like when I ask you this, I have to be like, what's your favorite guilty pleasure comic?
This is going out across the airwaves, James.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to admit to liking something that somebody might make fun of you for.
I think so. Yeah.
There's no judgment here. This is a safe space.
Yeah. I've got comics from all over at school that I've got, and a bunch of them were given to me from my local comic shop. And one of the ones that's in there that's kind of fun is My Little Pony from like the 90s. I swear to God,
James is a brony.
It is truly like a cotton candy story. It's got that kind of endearing, like 90s kind of nostalgia with it and all that. And I've just got the one issue of that.
Nice.
But, I'm trying to think if they've got a modern one of those or not. I know they've got a modern Care Bears now. So
yeah, My Little Pony's always got something out around Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah,
they're still very much a player in the comics industry.
Yeah.
Is there like a character that you have a secret affinity for, or like you feel like people like don't understand him? Kind of like the way Aquaman was before Jason Momoa made him cool,
right?
If it wasn't for Jason Momoa, like no one would care about Aquaman. I mean, my wife enjoyed that movie, so I mean, I'm sure that he had a lot to do with that.
Right.
One of the characters that kind of has a cult following that most people don't really understand, I think, is Moon Knight, actually. He's my favorite Marvel character, hands down. But everyone basically says, well, he's Marvel's Batman. Well, not really. I mean, he's got this really incredible backstory kind of on its own, and people like Warren Ellis and Jeff Lemire have really kind of added to his mythos and stuff, having it's multiple personality disorder, but I can't think of what the new phrase for that is.
I think it's identity
dissociative identity disorder.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
But when you've got 3 or 4 personalities that are kind of vying for control, and sometimes they work together and sometimes they don't, it makes for a really interesting storyline. So he's definitely not, Marvel's Batman. He's kind of his own character, and definitely, a worthy character in his own right. We can kind of forget the West Coast Avenger years and some of the earlier stuff before they kind of put in the dissociative identity disorder stuff, because before that, he was basically just a guy that dressed up in a white sheet and punched people.
Right.
So, if I
like
ask
Casper.
you,
Casper, yeah.
He's Casper, the angry ghost.
Right.
I pity the fool. So,
Casper's take his revenge on the living.
So if I were to ask you the next question, and this you probably just answered it, was what character do you wish was could be portrayed in a modern like TV show or movie? So I'm guessing that you're pretty excited about the upcoming Moon Knight show.
I can't wait. I really hope they do it right, and I think they will. Everything's been coming out from Disney Plus has been pretty good. Mm-hmm. I've been watching the Mandalorian, and it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Really looking forward to the MCU shows that are going to be coming out over the next couple of years too. I think that's going to be really good.
And 7 of them at that. Like Star Wars doesn't even have that many promised, right?
Yeah. But, if we go DC, I really don't want to see another Batman movie. I really don't. I feel like I've seen it all. I'd rather see someone like Nightwing or anyone else.
Literally anyone else.
Literally anyone else. I'll see the new Batman movie that's coming out, but
right.
I'm like, I want something different. What would be awesome? What about a Zatanna movie? They did the Joker movie well. They did Wonder Woman. They did Aquaman. So they've kind of proven, especially with Aquaman, that they can take a character that no one really knows about and do a good movie with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, James, our last question for you as a wrap up is, prior to the MCU, what's been your favorite comic movie?
Batman Begins.
Yes.
Yes. That came out in 2005. Mm-hmm. I ended up probably seeing that movie in theater 6 or 7 times. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it dozens of times since then. Mm-hmm. My wife and I were dating at the time. We went a few times to the movies. There were times that I had off days that I went to the dollar theater where you probably get bed bugs as easily as you'd get a cheap ticket, but you go, and I saw that movie so many times. It was just so well done. Mm-hmm. Like the Christopher Nolan movies are the Batman movies that we deserved,
right?
And let's maybe not do Batman for a while.
I'm with you. Like people would crap their beds if they found out they were going to remake The Godfather or Back to the Future or other things that are high in the pantheon of pop culture. I do not know why Batman gets a pass, why they have to reinvent him every few years.
I know. I mean, they've had so many remakes of that character back to back that's just let it die and breathe to begin with. I mean, if you look at Marvel and all their history of the cinematic films and stuff like that, with the exception of Spider-Man, but that's more of a Sony thing than it is a Marvel Studios thing. You could say it's their success, but I think part of the reason why they're so successful in that is that they're not relying on the character and making remakes of that same character over and over again either. I think Captain America, the first movie that came out was in the early 80s, and then they never touched it again until, the recent version of it with Chris Evans. I think that's just what's happened here, is that everyone loved the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. But it's like, before you can let that rest and settle, all of a sudden you're making a new Batman movie in a new universe to try to compete with the MCU in a sense. And that's why people aren't liking it, is because you're trying to make it too much like MCU that just keeps, going horrible. And now we're having a third Batman within the span of 10 years, basically. So
my child is 10 years old, and this will be his third Batman. So,
yeah.
I mean, the last of the Christopher Nolan movies came out in 2012.
Right.
Let's give it a little bit of time.
The thing is they can't make any money off of that.
Right.
Yeah. Like you could advise everybody, like, you know what, save your time and money and just go watch Batman Begins or go watch the Dark Knight trilogy again. But that's not making Warner Brothers any money. So,
but just think about this. They took the Joker and made $1 billion movie with it. They took Wonder Woman, made a ton of money with that one. That movie's okay. It's good. I've watched it once or twice. I come back to the MCU movies a little more frequently, but for what it is, it's a good movie. Aquaman's fantastic. So, let's do some other characters.
All right, James, we tricked you. That was not the final question, because before we let you go, I want you to talk to our listeners a little bit about how you use comics in the classroom, being a teacher. Kind of just, tell them what you teach, and then how you kind of incorporate that stuff from time to time.
Okay. I teach world history, primarily from the end of World War I to the present. Before I taught that, I taught a little bit of everything. I taught geography. I taught U.S. history, 2 different time periods. Taught world history. So I taught about all the ancient societies as well. I also taught some reading courses. And what really got me into doing comics was I had to teach a reading class. And I had 33 kids in there. And I had kids on every reading level imaginable, and I had to do something to kind of engage them. So I taught Marvel's Civil War, because that was right after that movie came out. And I'm like, well, let's just try it. I know there's a lot of research out there about reading skills with this, and I'm like, I think our test scores could go up a lot, especially our MAP scores, which is what did. And everybody's math scores went up by at least 3 points on their reading test from fall to spring, which is actually pretty good for that. So
nice, yeah.
I ended up doing that with a small group of about 8 kids. But then I had, other kids like, hey, I want to do this too. I want to read the same book. So that gave me the opportunity to differentiate between, one small group that had a lower reading level and stuff, to where we could only really kind of focus more on, understanding what was going on in the book, to a higher reading level group to where we could get into all the post 9/11 hysteria, which is why we had Civil War in the first place. So that was just a really cool thing for me. So then fast forward 2 years, I'm teaching, and of course, well, let me back up. That was to a group of 8th graders. Well, they were 7th graders at the time. So 7th grade kids, I'm teaching that. We watched the movie at the end of it too, and we just had a ball. So then fast forward 2 years, I'm teaching 10th grade kids, and I was teaching about totalitarian government. So I brought in Alan Moore's V for Vendetta, which is another one of my favorite comic books of all time. And we broke down what a totalitarian government looks like, the types of things that, those kind of governments will do, kind of what's expected of people living under that type of regime and things like that. So I'm currently teaching that one right now. Actually, and the students are definitely pulling out that kind of futuristic take on a totalitarian government. And they are equating that with what happened in Germany during the 1930s and 40s, Italy, North Korea today, Russia today, with those kind of totalitarian regimes. And it's just really nice to see that. So, but that's just one of the many books that I use. And
so you use it to draw like historical parallels?
Yeah, exactly. There's other teachers out there like Jill Gerber, Tim Smythe, that really use comics a lot more from the literacy aspect, which, I do that too, because I really believe that, we're all teachers of reading, but, I really use these books as like societal and historical artifacts a lot, and I can pull in those parallels as well. So that's kind of how I do things. So like in the spring, we'll be reading X-Men Magneto Testament that talks about young Max Eisenhardt and how he grew up during Nazi Germany and how that kind of played a part in Magneto's origin story. So, I mean, we use that, and then we use some of the Marvel books that are anti-communist and various things. So I get to use them a lot more in the spring. I'm actually kind of planning out a class to teach U.S. history through comics from World War II through today. Maybe I can get that class passed this year. Mm-hmm. So working on it.
Well, fight the good fight, James.
Working on it.
Fight the good fight.
Yes, sir. Will do.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday once again, James.
Thank you.
And thank you for answering these questions, because inquiring minds want to know. And hopefully in the future, you'll get to hear Sean and I answer some of those questions. But for now, that wraps up another episode of the Caption Life podcast. Reach out to us on social media at Caption Life. If you have a question or you have a suggestion, we'd love to hear from you. And as always, check us out on whatever favorite podcast platform you listen to. Until next time, guys.
Peace out.
Good night.